This is DW News live from Berlin. Brazil becomes the second country to officially pass 400,000 COVID-19 deaths. Experts warn the daily death toll could remain high for months as the country heads towards winter. Hospitals are operating at or near capacity, but some areas have loosened restrictions. After 100 days in office, Joe Biden's first speech to Congress offers his vision for the U.S., including its borders. Biden calls for an end to what he says is America's exhausting war on immigration. We have a special report from the Mexico border. And Germany's top court strikes down the government's climate change law, saying it doesn't go far enough to prevent a climate crisis. I'm Raheela Mahomed. Thanks for joining us. Israeli media are reporting at least 40 people have been killed in a stampede at a religious gathering attended by tens of thousands. It happened at Mount Meron in the northern part of the country, where ultra-Orthodox Jews had come together for an all-night prayer and dance celebration.
This footage from social media shows the scene shortly before tragedy struck. A densely packed crowd dancing ecstatically at the annual Lag BaOmer celebration. Initial reports said chaos erupted after a section of the venue's bleachers collapsed. Rescue workers say the fatalities and injuries occurred in the stampede that followed.
We just finished treating one of Israel's worst disasters. A terrible disaster of people who came to celebrate Lag BaOmer at Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and unfortunately were literally crushed to death.
The Lag BaOmer religious festival is particularly popular with Israel's ultra-Orthodox community, of which tens of thousands turned out. It was the first large-scale religious gathering to be held legally since Israel lifted most coronavirus restrictions. But despite Israel's successful handling of the pandemic, health authorities had warned against holding a gathering of this size.
Now, Brazil is the second country after the United States to pass 400,000 coronavirus deaths. The country has struggled to secure enough vaccines for its population. Many hospitals are operating at the brink of capacity. But in the last 2 weeks, the daily death toll has declined, prompting some areas to loosen restrictions.
The streets are once again filling up in Sao Paulo and other cities after 4 weeks of local restrictions that have seen the number of new infections fall slightly. But the statistics are devastating. April has been the deadliest month in Brazil to date. Many experts say insufficient lockdown restrictions make the country a breeding ground for virus mutations that then spread to other countries. The P1 variant that first emerged in January in the city of Manaus has triggered an explosion of infections and deaths, with hospitals often running out of beds and oxygen. The poor are being disproportionately affected. Around 12 million Brazilians live in favelas, in extremely crowded conditions. Malnutrition is also a problem, especially as government aid has been cut and unemployment has risen during the pandemic. All the data shows that the poorer you are, the higher the rate of infection. The death rate from coronavirus is much higher amongst people who are on the margins of society. President Jair Bolsonaro argues that lockdowns increase economic hardship. But critics say Brazil is paying a high price for his radical stance. This week, the Senate opened an inquiry into Bolsonaro's handling of the pandemic. The president has resolutely ignored all scientific advice. He long played down the virus and encouraged the use of medications that doctors say are worthless. With his poll ratings taking a hit, Bolsonaro is now making more of an effort to procure vaccines from abroad. But in a country of well over 200 million, It will take many months to vaccinate even the most vulnerable at the current rate. In the meantime, without any nationwide restrictions, thousands are continuing to die in Brazil every day.
Well, for more on this, joining me from Sao Paulo is journalist Sam Cowie. Thanks for joining us, Sam. What's the reaction to the restrictions being loosened as we see another bleak figure in Brazil?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say, really, quite frankly, because there were never really any restrictions in the first place. So, yeah, like the local commerce associations are happy now that they can open their shops again, for example. Churches, evangelical mega churches, they were sad that they had to close for a while and stuff. But I mean, this is the thing: you go to the peripheries of Sao Paulo and other big urban centres, and there are no lockdown measures in place. Many people don't even wear masks. I was in a lower income neighbourhood on the outskirts of Sao Paulo just last Friday, and I went to one street where 5 people had died in the same week, and on the same street many people weren't wearing masks. Access to information is difficult. Lots of people have fallen victim to fake news, and also it's that when you have a president that says it's just a little flu, I used to be an athlete, it wouldn't affect me. For better or for worse, that resonates with lots of people who work in the informal economy and have to put food on the table each day. So all round, really, it's just a perfect storm of disaster. And some people, there was an ex-health ministry employee just this Tuesday saying the worst is still yet to come because of winter. It's a very bleak picture here indeed.
And what impact will the parliamentary inquiry into Bolsonaro's COVID response have on his leadership?
That's difficult to say. It's thought that the ex-health minister will probably, take the brunt of most of the blame. Mr. Bolsonaro still has it's dwindling, but he still has significant support on the streets and in Congress. So, I mean, a few heads are expected to roll, but what it will probably come down to will be horse trading with the senators, with the, ahead of elections next year, who are going to want, funds from the federal government to finance infrastructure projects and etc. in their constituencies before the elections next year. So, yeah, it probably will be a kind of slow bleed kind of situation for the president, but very tough to say at this stage whether it will, lead to an impeachment or any, highly unlikely any criminal proceedings. But probably his popularity will take a further hit.
All right, that is journalist Sam Cowie speaking to us from Sao Paulo. Thank you so much, Sam. Now, the southern border of the United States is one of the most contentious issues facing President Joe Biden as he marks 100 days in office. In his first speech to Congress on Wednesday, Biden called for an end to America's war on immigration. But to solve the border problem, he'll have to succeed where his predecessors have failed. DW correspondent Carolina Chimoy sent us this report from Texas.
Family Barrera lives at the U.S. border next to Mexico and Texas. Lately, they have seen more and more immigrants arriving on the U.S. side. Many of them cross their front yard and even knock on their door.
They come and knock, like asking where they're at, what area they're at. They borrow phones, water, food, anything in any way that they could get help. It's scary because of the fact that one could get into problems. Another one, how we say, we don't know who they are.
Once a week, they get to the other side of the wall, to the river. Fishing in the Rio Grande, the natural border between Texas and Mexico, has been a tradition in their family for generations. There, they enjoy a beautiful landscape and a peaceful activity at a river that for many on the other side looks dangerous and life-changing.
Cuando estaba Trump, se miraba menos. Mirábamos nosotros menos.
With Trump, we saw less people crossing the border. Since Biden, there are more. My parents, they are from Mexico, so I do understand them. But we just can't help. We can't do anything for them.
Tanto y esto, no podemos hacer más por ellos.
Helping undocumented immigrants is against the law in the U.S. Helpers can even get arrested. Many of the people who cross the river are from Central America. They escape from life-threatening situations at home, where criminal activities are part of everyday life. For many, paying a coyote to get to the U.S. is their only option. Clothes on the ground show where they crossed the river, and wristbands mark their path.
From here, it's only a 5 to 10 minutes ride to cross the Rio Grande. The river gets really narrow here. This is why around 700 immigrants cross the river from Mexico to the United States seeking asylum every day, especially during the night. According to the U.S. Custom and Border Protection, this number is going to increase during the next months. A huge challenge for President Biden, who has promised a more humane immigration policy.
Instead, the streets in Roma are packed with National Guard, state troopers, and police officers. Thousands of immigrants have been arriving every month in a city of roughly 12,000 residents. The mayor is concerned. He knows the number is most likely going to increase.
We're on their side as far as we understand why, but at the same time, we wish that there was a better way for them to come across, a more legal way. And I think that's going to entail immigration reform for a better policy, because right now an open border type situation is not the safest for anybody.
An everyday concern for people like the Barrera family, who know there is not an easy solution. They just want freedom and to live without fear, just like the ones who cross the border.
So, Carolina, tell us, what is Biden's mission now to deal with this crisis on the U.S.-Mexico border?
Well, so far, President Biden has not really addressed the crisis here in the southern border of the United States to Mexico. And this is probably a big mistake, because Republicans are using this as a political tool against him, against Democrats. And actually, this crisis has been overshadowing also his first 100 days in office. We have been seeing an increase in law enforcement agents, like the border patrols you can see behind me. There are also state troopers, and the National Guard is also here at the border, but there is no long-term solution. And that is exactly what people here in Texas are expecting from their president.
We also know that Biden has long campaigned to change U.S. policy on immigration. What will he need to do to get more support in Congress?
That is exactly the problem and the big challenge for President Biden, because Democrats have a razor-thin majority in the House of Representatives. They don't have a majority in the Senate, but the tie-breaking vote of Vice President Kamala Harris, and they do need to convince the Republicans to support them in this immigration reform, and not only the immigration reform that includes a path to citizenship for roughly 11 million undocumented immigrants, including dreamers. That means the kids who arrived here in the United States and grew up here, including farm workers and immigrants with a temporary protected status. But they also have to tackle the southern border crisis, and therefore they do need the Republican support. The issue of immigration has never been a popular issue. It divides people, and Republicans know that. This is why they're using that, and it's not certain if President Biden is going to convince the Republicans he needs to have on the boat to change this immigration policy in the States.
All right, we'll have to see how that goes. That's DW correspondent Carolina Chimoy in Mission, Texas. Thank you. Now, Germany will start returning sculptures looted from Africa during colonial times. The objects, known as the Benin bronzes, were originally taken by British soldiers in the 19th century. They were later sold to museums worldwide, and many are held in Germany. They're considered some of Africa's greatest cultural treasures and will be returned to Nigeria next year. Well, that's it. You're up to date. Up next is our COVID-19 special. A reminder, you can find much more news on our website, that is dw.com, and there will be more world news at the top of the hour. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.